Well, good evening, and welcome again to the 2012fad.com. I will be your host this evening. My name is Charlie Bluehawk. Last night we chatted about why are we doing this? Why are we doing this now? Well, as I mentioned, that's a tough one. As I said earlier, I've known about the event since I was 10 years old. I'm 52 now, and pretty much for the last 40 years, I've been trying to get people to wake up, pay attention. Excuse me, you're standing on the train tracks, and oh, by the way, that's a train that's coming, only to be kicked and slapped around because I was the one who pointed out there was a train coming. So I got sort of tired of it after several decades of the abuse and just stopped. And my business partner and friend, Kenneth Slinker, after my harassing him for about the last 5 years about this, came to me one day and says, Charlie, all that bizarre stuff you've been telling me, my God, it's all true. We should do a website. And thus, we are back. So anyway, tonight I thought we would cover what the world will be like after the event, because nobody ever actually talks about after the event, after the flip, after the wave, after the pulse, and after the planetary lightning. Damn, all those things we've talked about in previous episodes. So the question is, after all of that, why would anybody want to survive? What's there? And, that's a really good question. And I will try my best in our brief time together to give you, well, hopefully an intelligent answer. Let's start with what little we know about our own history, our own past. Now, if we accept, that the event happens like clockwork every 2,000 years, we talked about the lava, the magma solidifying on the bottom of the ocean floor, and every 32,000 years it does that or whatever, and as the lava flows every 30,000 years, the lava flow in this layer has a positive magnetic charge, and the layer of lava that's solidified right next to it 32,000 years later has a negative charge, and so on, sort of kind of proving the world flips end for end. So if we accept this, that every 32,000 years our world resets, and civilization, at least here on the surface, has to start all over again, we can pretty much safely say that the current race of people living on the surface of this planet, the descendants of only 25 survivors, this civilization is 32,000 years old. So, why is it that our written history barely goes back 8,000 years, which is barely 25% of our entire current history? The oldest known written records we have are on clay and stone tablets from Sumeria, and there are only a small handful of people on this planet who can read that. Now, there are cave paintings that go back much, much further in time than, 8,000 years, but we really never hear much about them. Remember those cave drawings we talked about earlier that showed the planetary lightning like rain just outside of your cave door? These are played down by science, ignored. Basically, why is that? Why would science ignore anything? Well, I spent 5 years at NASA dealing with scientists on a daily basis. And growing up as a small child, watching Star Trek and thinking, wow, scientists must be the most open-minded, most, aware people in the world. And 5 years at NASA proved me wrong. Because you see, as a scientist, let's talk about NASA for a second. If you're a scientist and you have any hopes of having a job, there's only one place you can work: for the government. Whether it's directly for the government, you work for NASA, and you're not very well paid, or you work for a university that's government funded, or you work for a corporation that has government contracts. Unless you follow the party line, you will find yourself unemployed, which is why we have all these tremendously bizarre explanations of why the universe works that make no sense. Because if a scientist, an astronomer, comes out and says, well, yeah, it's easy, the universe is electrical in nature, you just talk to the electrical engineer, He can build you a model of the planet Earth, and he can explain to you why the Earth cannot possibly have a molten core and have a magnetic field and all this stuff. You're going to be working at McDonald's. So, why do scientists ignore reality? It's really simple. They want to keep their jobs. They want to be paid. They have families to feed. They have children to send to college. And I saw this for 5 years at NASA. They're also very unhappy people because they cannot deal with the truth. And they drink quite excessively. Not like they do in New Zealand, but it's fairly impressive nonetheless. So a scientist cannot take any kind of fact, any kind of reality, and report it because they'll lose their job. Anything that contradicts the approved history of our world, like the cave paintings, is ignored. According to science today, 100,000 years ago, humans spontaneously popped up out of the earth, probably out under, found under cabbage leaves or something. And they began as all small children do, who just spontaneously appeared out of nowhere. They begin like children, and they start finger painting. And that's the explanation of the cave drawings that we have from scientists today. So I guess our next choice for historical literature, if of course you don't happen to read ancient Sumerian, is the Christian Bible. Lots of good historical stuff in there if you can ignore all the let's kill our neighbors because God told us to stuff. There are actually many, many, many more books to the Bible, but at a political meeting hundreds and hundreds of years ago called the Council of Nicaea, they edited out most of those chapters, books of the Bible that would have actually, again, told the truth, because the people in power wanted more power. They wanted to keep their power, and of course, they wanted more money. Today, we call them bankers. But, luckily, we also have the Hindu holy book, the Bhagavad Gita. Personally, I would go with the Bhagavad Gita as a more accurate recounting of our history. True, it is something like 100,000 pages long. But what very, very, very little of this amazing book I've read, it has more of a reporter's nonpartisan point of view of history rather than having a political agenda. Political agenda meaning you're descended from ancient Babylonian slave traders and you're trying to keep your herds of cattle in line. That would, of course, be us. Anyway, both these books tell stories of our ancestors living for many thousands of years, which to them was just a regular event, part of the natural course of their lives. Let's skip, for the moment, all the talk about gods and angels and demons and sinners, and let's